Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Blade Breaker's Daughters in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 36, Team-Ups and Training. For the purpose of this exercise, the defenders will only need to evade the attackers for 30 minutes for them to win, Byleth explained to the students as they gathered in the field where the mock battle was held. The attackers will start together while the defenders will be spread out throughout the forest. If we beat up the other team, do we win? Casper asked as he stood with the defense team, consisting of him, Ferdinand, Dimitri and Annette. That is also an option. You're welcome to try, Felix challenged as he stood with the attacking team, consisting of him, Ingrid, Edelgard, and Petra. Oh, I'm going to do more than try. Do keep in mind this is only an exercise, so excessive force will not be allowed. If you are forced down to one knee or start bleeding, you're out, Byleth said, before nodding to the defense team. If you will follow me, I'll guide you to your positions. Good luck, guys. Shay cheered them on from the sidelines. It wasn't her turn just yet, she was just excited to see the match play out. Let's do our best. Annette also cheered on as she followed her team. Then in the meantime let us develop our plan, Edelgard said, trying to immediately take charge. What's there to plan? She tracks them and I beat them. Felix responded as he gestured at Petra. Leave it to me. Not that I doubt Petra's abilities, but chasing them down one by one may take too much time. As if they'll be hiding. With how loud those two black eagles are, they'll practically be begging us to find them, Ingrid said. Felix smirked. And the boar will be even worse. Felix. There is a boar? Petra asked, confused. No, I believe he's referring to Dimitri, Edelgard explained. Ah. This is the metaphor. Professor Byleth was explaining this to me. His Highness is not a boar. Ingrid snapped, before glaring at Felix, and Felix, hey. Don't walk away from me. We're in the middle of a competition. Either help out or stay standing around gossiping about the boar with your new best friends. That's not, ugh, you're impossible sometimes, you know that. Edelgard sighed as she watched the blonde stomp after her classmate, clearly intent on lecturing him further. This is going to be difficult. Or, well, it would have been, if Casper hadn't decided he would rather be on the attack by ambushing them. Which consisted of him leaping from a tree with a war cry while swinging a wooden axe straight into the ground because he missed them entirely. And then the axe happened to get stuck in the dirt. Suffice to say, it was fairly easy for all four of the attackers to subdue him after that. Really, what was he thinking? Ingrid asked after Casper was sent off the field without his weapon. The whole purpose of the exercise is to stay on the defensive, not just attack out of nowhere like some wildmen. Casper is enthusiastic, Edelgard elected to say, deciding to be charitable to her classmate. I won't disagree that it has caused him more problems than he would have otherwise though. Then shouldn't you be fixing that? You're supposed to be his house leader, after all. Or are such things beneath her royal highness? Edelgard frowned at the blatant hostility. Should I take that to mean that your house leader takes an active role in correcting his housemates' issues? Of course. His Highness has been a perfect leader, one who would never do something as foolish as, Ingrid trailed off, largely because their group had come to a clearing where Dimitri stood at attention, his spear in hand. Ah, there you are. You will go no further, for I shall protect my fellow defenders directly. Edelgard glanced at Ingrid. To be fair, he isn't directly attacking us. He is still acting on the defensive. Please don't try to comfort me. Dimitri blinked. Comfort you? Is something wrong? No, there isn't, Felix said as he stepped from the trees he'd been searching, wooden sword in hand, especially not now that I have a chance to settle things with you, boar. Felix, very well then. Though you are my friend, I shall not hold back, ow. Dimitri exclaimed, a hand immediately going to his head where a rock had just bounced off of it. Petra. Don't throw rocks at his highness. Ingrid protested. The Brigidian princess just looked confused though. Are we not meant to be making the defenders be bleeding? Professor Byleth said to have blood drawn is to be disqualified, correct? Well, still. It's fine, Ingrid, Dmitri said, waving off her concern as he tossed his spear aside. Petra acted within the bounds of the exercise. Now I think I'm going to go ask the professor to heal this, because, ow. Felix, meanwhile, grunted irritably before just heading off into another part of the woods, aiming to track down another one of the defenders. He didn't, though Petra did manage to find Ferdinand, who had actually bothered to hide. So it seems you've caught me, but I will not be going down without a, ow. You know, I don't think the professor had throwing rocks in mind when she laid out the parameters of this exercise, Edelgard noted after Ferdinand wandered off, rubbing the bruise on his head. I doubt the professor had much in mind with how vague those parameters were, Ingrid grumbled, prompting frowns from both eagles. Do not be insulting the professor, Petra said, glaring at Ingrid. Huh? I wasn't, I just. You were. You are saying she does not have much in her mind, that is an insult. That's not what I meant. Do not be lying to me. You are thinking I am being stupid too. I didn't say that. But it is what you are meaning. You are being insulting the entire of this time. You're both being stupid, Felix interrupted, scowling at both of them, which was the exact wrong thing to say as Petra visibly stiffened. We still have a. I am not stupid. Petra snapped, glaring straight at Felix and actually stepping towards him, her hand tight around the rock still in her grip. Felix blinked, before his eyes narrowed. Then stop acting like it. Petra's eyes widened before a genuine snarl came to her face, and then Edelgard punched Felix straight in the face. Felix! Ingrid exclaimed as her friend stumbled back, before glaring at Edelgard. What was that? Edelgard shrugged, idly shaking out her hand. I believe that was me disqualifying myself for deliberately injuring a team member. Petra's more useful as a tracker, so it's better I leave than she does. Your problems are with me, right? Staying quiet, Ingrid stared as Edelgard walked off, leaving her with Petra and Felix, who was getting up from the punch, his cheek already bruised. Humph, didn't expect someone so small to be so strong, Felix said, a bit of interest in his voice. Seriously? That's what you're focused on? Ingrid asked, very exasperated. I shall continue the hunt, Petra said, before Ingrid stopped her. Wait, Petra. Frowning, Ingrid tried to think of how to say what she wanted. I'm sorry, I genuinely don't have anything against you, especially as a prisoner of the Empire. I am not just a prisoner. Edelgard is my friend. Any insult you speak of her, or our professor, is one I shall not stand, Petra said, surprising Ingrid. That, I don't understand how you can think of anyone from the Empire as your friend after what happened to your people. None of my classmates were in the conflict. They are not the ones who were fighting, much like how I did not fight back then. I may not have understanding of your anger, but I do not believe any of them hurt you. It's more complicated than that. Petra shrugged. If you are saying so, I will not further be arguing. I am not agreeing, yet I am willing to be putting aside our conflicts to be finishing our assignment. Ingrid sighed, then tried to smile. Yes, we should get back to the exercise. We should still have some time to find Annette and win this, right? They didn't. Or at least they didn't have enough time to actually find Annette before the exercise ended, because the smallest lion actually did her best to hide the entire time instead of trying to fight the attackers. Yes. I knew hiding in the trees would work. Annette exclaimed with a happy grin after the professor announced her team the winners of the exercise. Oh, I should have thinking of that before, Petra commented, half disappointed and half impressed. Treetops are very safe places to be hiding. Right? Though I can't take all the credit, I actually got the idea from seeing Casper scramble up into the trees so quickly early on. Annette grinned over at her teammate, who looked a little sheepish. Though it looks like they found you anyway, huh? Yeah, well, it's more like I let myself be found. Because I never run from a fight. So you just jumped into a fight you couldn't win, Felix commented, ignoring how most of his classmates were looking at the obvious bruise on his face. Hey, I would have had a chance if my axe didn't get stuck. Don't swing your axe into dirt next time, Casper, Byleth chided, as you discovered, it can get stuck in the ground really easily. You also would have done actual damage if that hit landed. Just because the weapon is blunt doesn't mean it can't cause injuries. Ah, sorry about that, Professor. It's okay, you're learning. She turned to the rest of the teams. Dimitri, you need to be more aware of your surroundings. You also can't be on defense all on your own. A sacrifice play isn't the worst move to make, but it does remove your ability to help after the fact. I understand, Professor. Dimitri bowed his head, which had been healed up by the professor without even a scratch remaining. What do you think would have been better? Considering how the match played out, it would have been better for you, Casper, and Ferdinand to form a defensive line while Annette hid. All three of you are decent melee combatants, and joining together would have allowed you to cover each other's weaknesses and defend from things like sudden projectiles. The boys couldn't help but glance at Petra. Yes, that probably would have been better. I suppose my issues were much the same then, Professor? Ferdinand asked. Sort of. You did try to hide, which wasn't a bad plan since you were on your own at that point, though you did have the exact same outcome as Dimitri once you decided to fight, so you should also work on your spatial awareness. We can figure that out later though. Moving on to the attacker team, I can't say you did well despite managing to eliminate 3 of your opponents. Professor, if I may. Edelgard stepped forward. I take full responsibility for how things went. I did not lead my teammates properly and I struck one of them in a moment of anger. Our failures were my responsibility. I was paying attention, Edelgard. I know what happened, Byleth quite bluntly stated, making it clear to everyone on the attacker team that the professor was fully aware of their arguments. That said, if you want to take responsibility, that's fine. You are the house leader and arguably the leader of your team, though you did not take much of a leadership role past the beginning of the match. Should I take that to mean you didn't think you could lead the Lions in your group? Edelgard frowned, before glancing at her teammates. Truthfully, she'd been willing to let things play out as they did, to a point, because she could tell Ingrid would be combative and Felix would be dismissive. That didn't mean she should have left things as they were though, especially considering she had classmates with similarly difficult personalities. I didn't think of it that way, Professor, but you're right. I should have been a stronger leader to my teammates, even if they aren't in my house. Byleth nodded. If you want to lead, you need to lead everyone on your side, not just the people you like the best. On that subject, Felix, you didn't work with your team at all. This was a team exercise, so that means you failed. Felix frowned. What do you mean I failed? I meant what I said. Your team lost, remember? It doesn't matter if you succeed in your individual goals if you don't achieve your overall objective. You didn't do either anyway, so you failed and we're going to need to work on that. He scowled, but didn't reply, just crossing his arms over his chest as he glared mulishly at the professor. Ingrid, I think you already know where you went wrong. I do, Professor, Ingrid admitted. Tensions are easy to rise and hard to quell. People say personal feelings don't have a place on the battlefield, and they shouldn't, but they tend to appear anyway. Just remember, it doesn't matter where your comrades come from as long as they're on your side. But how can I be sure they're actually on my side? She asked, sounding ashamed to even be asking it but clearly having trouble. Common interest. As long as you know they share the same goal you do, that's all you need. Finally, Petra, good work with the rocks. That was smart thinking. Petra blinked, then smiled. Ah, thank you, Professor. I am glad to be hearing my idea was a good one. It was. Unexpected projectiles are difficult to defend against and even rocks can be extremely dangerous to the unprepared and undefended. For the record, I leave the parameters vague on purpose because on the battlefield you'll need to be able to think on your own. Being able to think up plans on the spot will save you in combat should things go awry. With her piece said, she walked up and patted Petra and Annette on the head. Good job. Thank you, Professor. Humph. You, Petra, was it? Felix asked, getting the Brigid girl's attention as Byleth went to get the next group of students. I want you to throw rocks at me. May I be asking why? I'm not going to let myself get taken out as easily as the boar, so I want to train my reflexes. You throw things quickly, Felix said, as blunt as ever. I see. And will you be apologizing for your words and actions in the forest? Felix grimaced. I don't see why I should. Then you will not be seeing the things you wish to be seeing. Apologize, or the rocks will be coming to the back of your head. His scowl deepened, before he let out an aggrieved sigh. Fine. I'm sorry I called you stupid. Can we get on with this now? You are being very lucky that I am wishing to throw rocks at you anyway. Be warned, I shall not be holding back. With a firm nod, Petra grabbed several more rocks so she could assist him in training. Glancing over at Ingrid, Edelgard gave her a curt nod, before walking back towards where the rest of her classmates were. As for Ingrid herself, her mind couldn't help but wander to Petra's words, before she let out a frustrated huff and headed back to her own classmates. The next practice mission fared a bit better as the attacking team of Bernadetta, Dorothea, Didu, and Ash seemed to actually make a plan of attack, while the defending team of Hubert, Linhard, Mercedes and Sylvain were able to use the number of mages on their side to their advantage. Not wanting to draw too much attention thanks to his size, Didu would follow behind to cover their rear, while Ash and Bernadetta would take the lead to search for anyone hiding. With the front and rear decided, Dorothea, as the most sociable of the team, took on the leader role and took center position to give commands. That being said, they were still up against rather smart students. Stumbling across Linhard, who appeared to be surrendering, they were unable to see the trap laid for them. Before they could apprehend him, they ended up getting blinded by a flash of light magic from Mercedes. A pair of yelps from Bernadetta and Ash were able to tell Dorothea what was going on as she and Didu retreated, only to run right into Hubert, who hit Didu straight in the leg with a ball of magic. The large student grunted as he fell to a knee, before frowning over at Hubert. Don't look so angry. The professor said either we draw blood or bring you to a knee, and I like to think I took the kinder option, Hubert taunted, before aiming his hand at Dorothea. Hello Dorothea. I would suggest you surrender now to spare yourself any extra. Then he had to duck Dorothea's responding shot as his fellow mage smirked. Now Hubie, you should at least buy me dinner before trying to get me on my knees. Well hey, if he's not going to take you up on it, mind if I accept that offer? Sylvain asked as he poked the head of his spear against Dorothea's back. Right, I forgot about you. Dorothea sighed, before raising her hands in surrender. Good, that one went better, Byleth began a few minutes later, once everyone was gathered again. Good planning on both of your parts, Dorothea, Hubert. The formation was a good idea, Dorothea, though it left you vulnerable to traps, as you saw. The songstress sighed. Yes, that one trap did completely upend everything we wanted to do. I'm not sure what I could have done better though. It depends. I wouldn't say there's much you could have done better, so much as done differently. Having Ash and Bernadetta scout ahead was a good idea, but both of them were more vulnerable in melee combat. Ash is better at it, but Bernadetta prefers being an archer. She does have a talent for lances. Either way, she might have been better staying at your side. Didu might be more noticeable, but he is hardier too and would be better at defending in the case of an ambush. You didn't have a guarantee that was what your opponents would do, which is why you should consider who you're facing. Does Hubert seem more like the type to hide or to fight, for instance? Dorothea pouted. Hubie's more the type to do exactly what he did, which is to trap and ambush us. So, I guess I see your point. Byleth nodded, before looking at Hubert. Good work. You had a plan and you executed it well. Why thank you, Professor. Though, I should admit, I was thinking about it from the moment you announced what the teams would be for today. He grinned. I spent most of last match planning out the particulars. That's fine. Remember, everyone, planning ahead is always a good decision. Just leave yourself enough flexibility to change your plans if you need to. Also, I have one criticism. Don't taunt your opponent while they're still a threat. Hubert sighed, his grin turning more wry. You have a point, Professor. It would have been quite embarrassing to be eliminated right at my moment of victory. Good. Mercedes, good work with the light spell. You did exactly what was required of you and you worked well with your teammates. Excellent job all around. The blonde beamed. Thank you very much, Professor. Linhard, you also did well, but please take naps ahead of exercises. It would be bad if you fell asleep in the middle of battle. I don't think you'll have to worry about that, Professor, Lin said with a sleepy yawn, before pausing. Wait, do I have your permission to nap before exercises? Sure, if you have nothing better to do. I think you might be my favorite professor. Byleth blinked at that, before deciding to just move along. Ash, you did fine, though maybe we should work on your ability to fight in low-vision situations. Being blinded is never fun, but there are ways to compensate for it. That's good to know, Professor. Thank you for the offer. She nodded to him, then glanced at the tree Bernadetta was hiding behind. Bernadetta, good work. You stayed on task and kept calm. You might have lost, but take pride in that. Why you don't need to praise me so much, Bernadetta mumbled, though it was hard to miss the happiness in her tone. Didu, you did well. We should work on some techniques to deal with mages though. You probably would have been able to get back up and handle Hubert if it weren't for the conditions of the match, so it's not too bad. Thank you for your advice, Professor, though I can't help but think I could have done better, he replied, prompting a thoughtful look from Byleth. You were ambushed, so there's not much we can do aside from working on improving your spatial awareness. The problem is that your opponent decided to target you first since they recognized you would be the more immediate threat, and there's not much we can do to keep that from happening aside from giving you enough armor to make sure anyone that tries is going to fail. I see, I would not be against practicing further with heavy armors then. Maybe later? That might be a good exercise. Let some students be more heavily defended, Byleth considered, before glancing at Sylvain. Sylvain, you did well in following the plan and defeating your opponents. Stop sexually harassing your fellow students. Sylvain's lazy grin dropped in genuine surprise. Whoa, wait, that's not, I wasn't, I meant the offer for dinner, not. The implications were obvious. On that subject, I should probably tell you not to do the same, Dorothea. The songstress pouted. It was just a little teasing, Professor. I wasn't the one pressing my length of wood against a young woman's back. Okay, I guess I need to talk to both of you about inappropriate euphemisms. We can save that for later though. For now, next teams. Alright, my turn. Shay cheered as she came up. Hope you're ready to lose. Pretty sure you should talk big only after you win, Emily muttered. Pretty sure I'm going to win, but you're more than welcome to try and beat me, Shay challenged, getting a competitive smirk from Emily. Watching from the sidelines as Byleth led the new team of defenders consisting of Petra, Emily, Didu, and Sylvain, Edelgard couldn't help but feel her suspicions grow as she saw Shay and Emily interact. It was hard to tell, her professor seemed genuinely sincere, so she had trouble imagining she was part of the Slithers but, by her own admission, they just so happened to meet Shay in the woods one day, so it was entirely possible that this was a long-term plan those who slithered had made. Not that she would be surprised if it was, as a majority of their plans seemed to involve the long term. However, if that was the case, would her professor be able to fight her sister? Having Byleth on her side would be a boon she wouldn't readily let go, yet, having her turn her blade against her sister was not something Edelgard was looking forward to, should the younger sister prove to be an impostor. Frowning, she turned her gaze to the attacking team, and took note of Shay talking happily to Annette, Casper, and Hubert. One thing was certain, no matter what, she had to find out the truth of the matter. Was Shay really the carefree idiot she appeared to be, or was that merely a facade hiding a devious schemer? Okay, so, I have a plan. Shay declared to her group, me and Casper will lead the charge while Hubert and Annette blow up the forest with magic. Yeah, alright. Sounds good to me. Casper immediately agreed. By blow up the forest, do you mean we should use magic to destroy the woods? Annette asked, because that might be more escalation than the professor wants. Hey, she didn't say there was a rule against destroying cover, right? Besides, it should probably be fine as long as we don't set the whole place on fire. Shay paused. Unless that would smoke them out more easily. As impressive as I am sure it would be to see this entire stretch of forest go up in flames, I do believe such a conflagration would almost certainly get us all reprimanded by the professor, Hubert noted. I should also point out that if we are throwing around magic strong enough to destroy trees, it would likely do worse to our fellow students were they to be hit inadvertently. Oh, yeah, that's true. Well, okay, then we go with the original plan. Annette blinked. What's the original plan? Me and Casper charge in. Wait, that's the same plan. Yeah, but this time we don't destroy the forest. But then what do Hubert and I do? That's a good question that I don't have an answer for. Hubert had to admit, if Shay was indeed an infiltrator from those who slither in the dark, she was quite skilled at acting like a complete idiot. I think it can still work, Casper said. Like Shay said, me and her can charge in, and then you two can just pick off anyone we don't get. You'll be like our support guys. So we should just follow you too? Annette asked. Nah, you should probably hang back a bit, right? That way if something goes wrong, you can still get the win. A fair suggestion, and one we should probably take given that we do have a time limit, Hubert pointed out. Shay blinked. Wait, what? Did we already start? Oh crap, okay, let's go with that. And remember, don't burn down the forest unless it seems like a good idea. Annette stared as Shay sprinted off into the forest, followed by Casper, before glancing up at Hubert. The professor gave us those two as a handicap, huh? It would make sense, given that we won our previous rounds. Still, we should at least give it our best, correct? Hubert grinned, walking after his teammates at a sedate pace. And if it comes down to it, we can always burn the forest down. Hey, don't joke about that. Annette protested, hurrying after him. Shay, meanwhile, kept up her sprint through the forest, her eyes scanning the surrounding area for any hint of threats or ambushes before she came to one particularly big oak with a particularly big guy in front of it. Hey Didu. Hello Shay. You seem excited, the large Duskuran noted. Yeah, I'll be honest, I've been wanting to go at you. We haven't had a chance to spar together yet, and a big part of me wants to see what you can do. Well, I would prefer not to disappoint, Didu said as he took a ready stance with a large axe in his big hands. Geez, you can really move fast when you want to, Shay, Casper said as he finally caught up to her, before grinning when he saw his teammate facing off against one of their opponents. Alright, looks like we found one. Do you mind if I take him? Are you sure? Because I was kind of looking forward to this, Shay said. Well, if Didu is unavailable, maybe I could have this dance. Sylvain offered as he stepped out from around the tree, a cocky grin on his face and a spear in his hand. No thanks, Shay immediately replied. Casper, you mind fighting Sylvain instead? Oh, okay, I guess that can work. Come on Sylvain, let's see what you've got. Casper yelled before charging the redhead, who sighed. I'm just having no luck with women today, huh? In the meantime, Shay readied herself, taking in the sight of the solid and stalwart Didu standing in her way and feeling an eager grin come to her face. So, are you going to come at me, or do I go to you? I'm the one on defense, if you'll recall. And you're running out of time. Good point. And with that decided, Shay sprinted in, sword in hand as she lunged for Didu, though she didn't connect, mostly because she had to suddenly turn her thrust into a twist when Emily leaped down from the oak and nearly drop-kicked her in the face. The bloodthirsty eagle landed on her feet and immediately whirled, swinging her sword for Shay's head and instead catching her sword. And here I thought I'd get you with the first move. Cheap. Extremely cheap. Shay complained, swinging back and getting into a rapid exchange of strikes with a grinning Emily. What can I say? I knew you'd be too distracted going for the big hunk of meat in front of you to notice. Please do not refer to me like that, Didu requested as he swung his axe toward Shay's back, prompting her to disengage and leap back from the pair of defenders. Don't tell me what to do, beast. Emily snapped, prompting a frown from Shay. Hey, Emily. Not cool. What? Don't call Didu a beast. Or what? Ugh, no, shut up, I was going to have fun here. But Shay instead planted her sword into the dirt, frowning at Emily. Apologize to Didu. Are you serious? Completely. We can fight afterwards. Didu, meanwhile, just sighed. Shay, it is fine. I am used to it. That's worse. You are. Emily actually sounded confused there. Who else is calling you a beast? Many people in Faerghus. There are those who still blame the people of Duscur for the tragedy, even as their eyes have turned towards the Empire as the potential true perpetrators. I have been called worse than a beast before. It does not bother me. Oh please, like those filth have any room to talk, Emily scoffed. Vermin certainly have no right to be calling other beasts the same. Shay pinched the bridge of her nose while Didu gave Emily a bewildered look. Are you saying you called Didu a beast because you think he's from Faerghus? Ugh, do we really have to keep talking about this? Who cares where he's from, can't we get back to fighting now? Didu didn't really know what to make of that. He was used to prejudice because he came from Duscur and many people in Faerghus made no secret of their contempt. Seeing the same contempt directed towards the people of Faerghus was, well, it was different. Okay, but you and me are gonna have to talk after this, Shay agreed. Yup, like I don't get enough of that from Selene, fine. Fine, we can talk about not calling people beasts or whatever, but first, and then a ball of magic caught her in the chest and sent her crashing to the ground, right before a blast of wind magic knocked Didu off his feet. Ah, sorry Didu. Annette apologized. Oh, I hope I didn't overdo it. I'm fine, Didu answered, pushing himself up into a seated position as his fellow lion entered the clearing. Along with Hubert, who seemed amused by the truly venomous glare Emily was giving him. Thank you for distracting them, Shay. It made our part in the plan quite easy. The plan? There was another plan? Shay asked, before pausing. Ah dang it, I didn't get to fight either of the people I wanted to. Emily just stared at Shay for a moment, as though trying to see if she genuinely was disappointed or had intentionally tricked her, before letting out an aggravated growl. You, black-haired mongrel. Hubert raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting thing to call someone of a higher social standing than you. Whatever. Never interfere in one of my fights again. You realize the point of this exercise was to eliminate the competition, right? You're the one who insisted on posturing. I wasn't posturing. Shay distracted me. She turned her ire towards Shay. Which was a dirty trick. Huh? Wait, what was? Are you genuinely stupid or something? Shay shrugged. I'm smart in some ways. Anyways, here, let me help you up. And hey, you still need to apologize to Didu. Hubert raised an eyebrow at the byplay, especially with how incredulous Emily looked when Shay extended a hand out to her. Curiously, after a moment of scowling, she did take the offered hand and let Shay pull her to her feet, before glaring as her possible comrade went over to do the same for Didu. Not that the large man particularly needed her aid in standing, really, it was more likely he would pull her down if he actually took her hand. Still, with Casper soundly defeating Sylvain in combat, that meant Hubert's group had indeed succeeded despite their pair of idiots acting as a handicap. Wait. Where is Petra? Hubert wasn't happy to see his question actually prompted a smirk from Emily. Who knows? Ah. We completely forgot about her. Annette exclaimed, quick, start searching the trees. Huh? Wait, what's going on? Casper asked, dragging Sylvain behind him by the redhead's shirt. Our opponents turned out to be smarter than I expected, Hubert admitted, before glowering as Emily smirked all the wider. No, we probably shouldn't go with my first plan, Shay muttered, prompting a frown from Annette. We're not burning down the forest, Shay. You were going to do what? Didu asked, audibly alarmed. It was an idea. We weren't going to actually do it, probably, Shay explained, which didn't help soothe Didu's concerns at all and garnered a look of interest from Emily. We can talk about that later, come on, if we can hurry up, we can find her. Chapter 37, A Kind of Resolution. So, turns out Petra had just left the forest. The professor never said we had to stay, Petra explained, looking quite proud of herself when she greeted her fellow students once they left the forest. That feels like cheating, Annette muttered. It isn't, Byleth interjected. If we're sent to eliminate a group, then even a single person escaping can be a loss, and most opponents won't stick around if they think they've lost. That is the benefit for those on the defense. It may seem like they're losing, but ultimately it is the attackers that have to hunt them down, meaning the defenders are able to choose how to defend. Ambushing, facing straight on, hiding, or running away are all valid options when on the back foot in combat, and these are all options your opponent can take, Byleth explained as she turned to face the classes. I hope you all made sure to pay attention during those matches, as it will be important for tomorrow's lesson. I want you all to give me a brief summarization of a tactic you would use if you were in charge of the attacking squad tomorrow, where Hanneman and I shall discuss the merits and cons of such a plan. Professor, if I may, will we be only performing this type of scenario? Edelgard asked once Byleth was done speaking. No, we shall also be attempting other scenarios, but those shall remain a surprise for now, Byleth responded before nodding. If there are no other questions, class is dismissed. Professor, may we be speaking with one another? Petra asked as the students began to head back to the monastery. Of course, did you need something? I felt it appropriate we speak over matters of anger, Petra said once it was just the two of them. Ah, yeah, it would be good to do that, Byleth replied, before gesturing over to a nearby tree. Do you want to sit down? If you would like, Professor. I would. Walking over to the tree, the two sat together underneath it, a moment of silence passing over them before Byleth spoke. Would you like to talk about what happened during the session? It is foolish, a moment of anger that I should have controlled, Petra said, shaking her head. I am used to being spoken of as though I am stupid. I haven't heard anyone at the academy speaking about you like that. No, it was before. When I was being sent to the Empire I was treated like a strange beast. Things have changed, I have met people who treat me equal. And you don't like that they were being insulted. You have been treating us all with much kindness, even when it is not being returned. So even if I am being called stupid, you should not be called so. You're not stupid. You can speak 2 languages, that's more than pretty much everyone in the academy, Byleth said, smiling at Petra. You also came up with great plans that I didn't even expect. You have much kindness to be saying so. Petra smiled back. Thank you. And, I think I should be honest with you about something. I fought in the Dada and Brigid War. Petra blinked, her smile dropping. Oh. Yeah, I thought that might make things complicated. It's why I wanted to mention it instead of letting you find out on your own. I have understanding. You are wanting to be honest. I am wishing to ask, how were you, what was your, she grimaced, closing her eyes for a moment as she tried to think of the right words. Byleth just waited, letting her think. What were you doing in the war? My father was hired by Count Varley to defend his lands, though we actually fought some of your countrymen before that. A scouting party found our camp and attacked us. I guess they thought we might be a war camp or they just had orders to kill anyone they ran into. Ah, I am unhappy to be hearing that. You were, I am knowing that my countrymen were fighting and killing. Were people of your camp killed? Yeah. A man named Dalton died on our side. I killed 6 people that day. Shay killed 1 too, after he managed to stab her. Ah. You are having anger then, because your friend did die and your sister took injury. Byleth sighed, leaning back against the wood. I don't know if anger is the right emotion. I was worried, I think. I don't feel emotions the same way most people do. It's difficult for me to feel them properly. I didn't feel real anger until later, but that's a different story. I saw Shay fall, and I just had to get to her, so I killed everyone between me and her. And then, since my father took the job to fight for Count Varley, I killed more people from Brigid. Some from Dada too, but it was rare to fight them. The warriors of Brigid were doing scouting. The Dada were doing conquering. They were arriving with big ships and many weapons and armor. They had planning, I think, but they did failing instead. Petra let out a sigh of her own, drawing her knees up to her chest. My father was fighting. He did die too. I am not faulting you for defending your family, Professor. It does feel hurt though. After that first time, I wasn't defending my family, I was doing a job. I was a mercenary, Petra, and that means I killed your countrymen for coin, Byleth responded. Most of our jobs did involve protecting smaller villages, but it was still a job. There wasn't any noble sentiment behind it. Petra laughed without much humor. Nobles do not have much sentiment. A lot of them don't, that's true. It's not a position that lets them be sentimental. I have no idea why anyone would want to live like that. It is having responsibility. Some nobles are kind. Duke Girth was very kind to me. Other eagles are very kind as well. She frowned slightly. Lions are not as kind. They are more rude. Yeah, I might need to talk with them about that. Or maybe I should talk with Hanuman. They're his class. Anyway, that was what I wanted to say. I am having difficulty being thankful, Professor. It is complicating to know you have killed people of Brigid. Even if it was in war. That's fine. I've killed a lot of people, Petra. I don't expect forgiveness for it. I just want to be honest. Honesty is causing pain sometimes, Professor. Yeah. It does that. Petra glanced down at the grass. How many were you killing in the war? I personally killed 27 people in the time we participated in the war. Petra couldn't help but stare at her professor, who said such a thing completely calmly. I have understanding. That is, many. It is. Byleth leaned forward, staring towards the monastery. I think I've killed over 100 people so far. I was 15 then, and I'm 20 now. Ah. You have seen much death. I'm responsible for most of it. You do not have responsibility for war, Professor. That is the responsibility of kings and queens, not warriors. She wasn't completely sure why, but Petra felt something compel her to ask. What age did you have when you killed first? I was 14. It was a job to take care of some poachers at a small village in the Alliance, though I was just supposed to be a lookout along with Shay. Some poachers got into the village and Shay went in after them. One caught her, and he was choking her when I cut his head off. Byleth tilted her head, thinking. I think that was the first time I was worried. Not angry. No. Like I said, that's a different story. I would be wanting to hear this story, if it is not trouble, Professor. Byleth nodded, then explained her time in Faerghus, when she met Ash and Lonato, and when Catherine nearly killed her. By the end, Petra's eyes were wide. So that is why you were beating Instructor Jurat Saw. You remembered Lonato and were made angry. Yes. Very angry. But I'm working on it. You are working on it. You are working on anger. I'm trying to fix it. I do not think anger is a thing to be fixing. Anger is to be felt. You can control anger, yet I do not think you can fix anger. It is not broken. That's a good point, Byleth admitted. Emotions are difficult. I am thinking language is difficult. Emotions are felt. They are difficult to express. Emotions are difficult when you don't feel them, she replied, before pushing herself up. Okay, I think we should head back now. I hope I didn't make things awkward between us. Petra stared up at her professor, considering the woman in front of her. It was hard for her to admit, even to herself, but she couldn't help but look at her professor differently now, knowing Byleth had killed her countrymen. But, then, she already knew that her professor was a mercenary, and that she had blood on her hands. That wasn't a difficult expression to understand. Looking at Byleth, Petra couldn't help but picture her with blood dripping from her fingers, soaked in crimson all the way up to her elbows. Yet, she also knew her professor was kind. So she extended a hand towards her, asking without words for her help in standing up. And her professor took her hand without hesitation and pulled her to her feet. Her hand was warm, even with the imaginary blood soaking it. So Petra gave her professor a reassuring squeeze and a smile, to let her know that, even if things were complicated, she still liked her. She was sure the meaning came across because her professor smiled back as they made their way back up to the monastery. Hey Didu. Shay called out once she spotted her huge pal. Which wasn't hard, since he was still one of the tallest people she'd ever met. He might actually be the tallest, thinking about it, but the point was, he was very easy to spot and head over to. Didu paused, not expecting anyone to call out to him when he was eating, and glanced up from his bowl of stew. A slight frown crossed his face when he noticed who was accompanying Shay, but he was used to interacting with unpleasant people and he concealed it easily enough. "Hello Shay." "Good evening, Lady Emily." "Who are you calling lady?" Well, that was different. Shay elbowed her friend, frowning at her. "Hey, come on, you're being nice, remember?" "Ugh. Fine." "Good evening sir whatever of wherever," Korsh grunted back at Didu. "I am not a nobleman, Lady Emily. I have no titles you might need to refer to me with." "Oh great, so I'm allowed to be rude to you?" she asked, derision dripping with every word before she moved out of the way of another elbow. "Ha. Better luck next time. You're going to be really difficult about this, huh?" "Sure am." Shay rolled her eyes before setting down her own plate of fish and settling in across from Didu. "So, hey, sorry if we're disturbing your dinner, I just thought Emily should apologize for being a bitch earlier." While Didu could agree with Shay's assessment, he was fairly certain verbally agreeing would be worse for him in the long run. "Oh so now I'm a bitch, huh?" Korsh complained as she sat next to Shay, though she sounded less hostile when she was interacting with the mercenary than with, well, anyone else. "Yup," was Shay's blunt response. "Humph. Well what about you, you big brute? What do you think of me?" "Don't call him a brute either," Shay chided. "Well what should I call him, huh? How about his name? Like I know what that is." "Seriously? Ugh, maybe this was a bad idea." Didu could have told her that had she asked. It wasn't his place to though, so he just went back to his stew. Hopefully Korsh would just get bored and leave. "Hey." He glanced up, the spoon still at his lips as Korsh spoke up again. "What's your name?" He set the spoon back down. "My name is Didu Molinaro." "Didu Molinaro," she repeated, sounding out the syllables with a faint frown. "Okay, there, I know what his name is." "Do you want a cookie?" Shay asked. That's something really basic." "Yeah well I never needed to bother before now, so get off my back." "You didn't need to know people's names?" "I mean, I know I'm bad with names sometimes but do you just never ask?" "Pretty much. If I don't know someone's name already, either they're vermin I shouldn't care about or they're a dreg who's already beneath me." Well, Didu could give Korsh one thing, she was more honest in her prejudices than most nobles he had interacted with. It didn't make her any more pleasant, but at least she was open about being terrible. Shay seemed to be re-evaluating her opinion of the other girl, so at least something positive was coming out of this. "Yeah, this was a bad idea. Sorry about this, Didu. I kind of hoped, well, yeah, sorry." Hey. Why are you acting like I failed here?" Korsh whined. "Apologizing to someone isn't something you can pass or fail, You either do it or you don't, and you haven't. Look, okay, you like fighting, right? Hunting, getting stronger, all that stuff? Well just think of this like you're getting stronger in social stuff." Korsh frowned, before glaring down at the table. Shay, meanwhile, gave an apologetic look to Didu and mouthed "I'm sorry" to him. He just nodded back to her, accepting the apology, before looking at Korsh again. He didn't particularly like the idea of being used as social practice for an aggressive noble, but a part of him was curious what she might say now that she'd been called out so directly. At the very least, he could keep eating while she settled her inner turmoil. After some more silence, Korsh finally looked up at him. "I'm sorry I called you a beast." Didu's eyebrows raised. He genuinely wasn't expecting her to actually manage to apologize to him. He could count the number of nobles that had on one hand and still have fingers left over. "Apology accepted, Lady Emily. Stop calling me lady. It's annoying." Well, the contrition didn't last long. "Please." He blinked. It seemed he was 2 for 2 in things he'd never expected a prejudiced noble to ever say to him. Though he shouldn't give her too much credit, given how she clearly said it as an afterthought. "If that is what you want, Emily. Thanks. All right, now he was clearly hearing things. Or not, given Shay clearly grinned at her friend's progress. She nudged Korsh's shoulder and gave the frowning girl a thumbs up when she glowered at her, something that made Korsh pause before glancing away from her, seeming embarrassed. Which, well, since she was attempting to extend her hand in peace, he may as well reciprocate. Even if it was clearly at the behest of her friend. "How has school been going for you, Emily?" "Huh? Oh, it sucks. I hate it here and this whole place makes my skin crawl." He didn't expect that answer, though perhaps he should have. Korsh seemed to hate a number of things from what he could tell of his few interactions with her, so it was a surprise to see she liked Shay, who appeared to be a generally outgoing and friendly person. Though perhaps those friendly qualities were what allowed her to befriend the surly girl to begin with. Well, hey, what about classes?" Shay asked. "How's Bai been treating you?" "Ugh, her. She keeps trying to involve me in stuff. I'm not that coward, Varley, I don't need to be coaxed from my burrow." "Hey, don't be mean to Bernadetta either." "I'm not. I barely interact with her. Besides, you're the one she's terrified of." Yeah, I'm still not sure why that is. It can't be because of Byleth, because I'm pretty sure Bernie warmed up to her at this point. Maybe she caught a peek of your true nature, Huh? Oh, yeah, maybe that would do it. Lots of people were wary of me after the mock battle, which is fair, since I completely kicked ass there. Didyu continued to watch the byplay between the two girls as he finished his stew. He preferred eating alone when he wasn't with His Highness, and he didn't particularly like Korsh, but he could derive a little amusement from the duo's banter. Though a thought did occur to him. "Emily, have you had dinner yet?" Korsh paused, glancing up at him. "Ugh, you're a tall bastard. How haven't the rest of those blue beasts broken their necks yet trying to make eye contact with you?" "Hey. What? A lion is a beast, isn't it?" "I'll let it slide this time, just call them lions next time," Shay said while glaring at her. "Ugh, fine, and no, I don't eat the food here." "Wait, really?" Shay asked, a bit surprised. "You really should eat something, Emily," Didyu commented. "Even if you were only in one of the training sessions, you still expended a lot of energy. I don't need a nanny telling me what I already know. I just don't see why I should eat here. Look, I can get wanting to hunt down your own meal or something, but you really should just eat here. Here, the food is usually good." Skewering a bit of fish on a fork, Shay lifted it up for Emily. Hey, stop, I don't need you to fey." Emily was cut off as Shay shoved her fork in her mouth. "See?" Shay asked with a smile as Emily slowly chewed on the food in her mouth. "You might not like it here, but you might as well hey." With a start, Shay nearly jumped back in surprise as Emily immediately reached over to grab a fistful of her fish so she could eat more. "I only offered you some, get your own food." Emily seemed to make some type of response, yet it was completely muffled by the food in her mouth as she tried to reach for more. Didyu could only watch on in silence as the two began to fight over the food, the plate being tugged back and forth between them. "Perhaps you too," and before he could get them to stop, the plate went flying, the remains of the two fish sauté soaring in the air. The trio could only watch on in horror as if in slow motion the food arched in the air and landed right on Seath as he was walking by. Slowly turning towards them with fish in his hair, Seath glared at the students. Hey there," Shay greeted with an awkward smile. Emily, on the other hand, chose to immediately run. Not that she was able to get away as Seath was able to chase her down. The Chamberlain could move surprisingly quickly when he wanted to. Didyu could only sigh as he found himself being reprimanded alongside the two troublemakers. At least he had already finished his meal beforehand. After a far longer lecture than he personally thought was necessary for two girls fighting over a plate of fish, Didyu was finally allowed to leave and head back to his room for the night. "Hey Didyu." Or not, since Shay ran up to him immediately after he started leaving. "Hello Shay. Did you need something else?" Well, sort of. I wanted to say I'm sorry again." "Well, actually say I'm sorry, verbally, so you can hear it." "I was trying to make things right, but I ruined your dinner." "You didn't. I ate well enough even with Emily's presence. I'm used to people like her, though I will admit, she's the first person I've met whose prejudice extends to the whole of Faerghus and not just Duscur. He made a mental note to keep Emily from interacting with Ingrid, if at all possible. Still, I basically used you as a prop to sort out Emily's issues, and that wasn't nice of me at all. So I wanna make it up to you. You really don't have to. Well, I want to. You're my friend too, and friends do nice things for each other. So name something and I'll help you out with it. Dido raised an eyebrow at the strange girl. I honestly can't think of anything I would need your aid with. I do not mean that as a slight against you, I just tend to prefer solitude most days. Well, what about if I take you out for dinner then? Not at the mess hall, but somewhere fancy. Dido blinked. I do not think that is the best idea, Shay. I mentioned before what sort of rumors might spread if you are seen in my presence. Shay scoffed. Please, like I care about that. If I hear someone talking bad about either of us, I'll just punch them. People already know I'm a dangerous mercenary, so I'll just coast off of that. Dido sighed, trying not to smile. I still think this is a bad idea. And I think it's a great one. Come on, say yes. Very well, if you insist. Yes. All right, I guess we should do this on our next free day or something. We can figure out the specifics later. For now, you just think of where you'd like to go and I'll make it happen. Very well, I shall look forward to it. Dido said, nodding to her before he made his way back to his room. Perhaps it wasn't as bad of a dinner as he initially thought. Chapter 38, The Songstress. Letting out a sigh, Dorothea leaned back in the chair she was sitting in and stretched her arms over her head. A part of her noted the stares she received as she did so, but she was more focused on the papers in front of her. Now, while Dorothea would never call herself dumb, she did also know she would inevitably start off far behind her classmates when it came to certain aspects of the academy. Sure, she was handy with a sword, was pretty confident in her magic skills, and even knew how to wield a dagger just in case. However, as a commoner there were things she would never have been able to practice beforehand. Horses, Pegasi, and by extension wyverns were something she had already accepted were not going to be her forte, especially since she could barely get on a horse without falling off. Which led to her current conundrum, tactics. Yes, she had played the role of a tactical leader beforehand in some smaller plays, but that didn't involve any actual planning, and, if anything, was more focused on the charismatic aspect of said leader. As such, she couldn't help but be stumped as she tried to figure out what to do for the assignment Byleth had given her. If it were our class, would Casper be a good choice? He's small, but he is loud. Well, this is just an assignment, so maybe I could send Ferdy first. It's not like he'd actually get hurt, Dorothea mused, finding some slight enjoyment as she remembered Ferdinand getting pelted by a rock. Excuse me, Dorothea. Blinking as she was broken out of her thoughts, the diva looked over her shoulder to see Edelgard standing behind her. Oh, hello Edie, to what do I owe the pleasure? I wanted to ask for your assistance, if you were not busy. Oh? And how exactly could I help the Emperor to be? Dorothea asked with a teasing tone. I actually wanted to ask for your advice on the assignment, Edelgard said, getting Dorothea to pause. You want to ask me for help? Yes, I feel like your help would be the most helpful given my own failings during the exercise, Edelgard explained as she sat down with her. Really? As I said, yes. I was not able to control the team well, and regardless of the tensions between the nations, I should have taken charge. Whereas you were able to take command quite easily during the exercise. Thanks for the nice words, Edie, but I'm pretty sure that's because of who I was teamed up with. Dido and Ash were born commoners, and Bernie is just a sweet girl in general. If I ended up with your team, it would have been a mess. Be that as it may, you still showed excellent initiative. As such, I would like to know how to be more personable, like you. Excuse me. I admit that my words may not be the most gentle, and I certainly do not want to end up coddling anyone, but, at the very least an emperor is one who needs to be charismatic. Hence why I wish to learn from you, if possible. Well, if you're going to ask so nicely, how can I say no? Though I hope you don't mind helping me out as well, Dorothea said, looking down at the sheet in front of her. Oh, I would gladly help. I've actually prepared a few different examples, so I'm sure I can assist with that. Wow, you actually did multiple? Dorothea asked, amused. Really trying to impress the professor, huh? I don't know what you mean. As the future emperor I must prepare multiple means of attack whenever I am in charge, Edelgard said, blushing as she cleared her throat. If you say so, Dorothea teased. Well, if you want to help, I was wondering who I should have in the lead. Petra seems like a good option with how quick she can be, but I'd rather not send her up by herself. Then why not send me along as well? Really? I mean, not that I'm underestimating you, but you are royalty and all. Pretty sure it'd look bad if I tried sending you to the front lines. In combat, titles mean nothing, Edelgard responded. When I'm up against someone who is willing to kill, whether I am a commoner or the emperor won't matter to them. It also shouldn't matter to whoever is the field commander, as they should ensure to use all their soldiers in ways that would best suit them. For example, I may not be as large as Dedue, but I am focusing on wearing heavy armor in combat, so I would be best suited at the front lines since I won't be moving as quickly as anyone else. Wow, Edie, hearing you say that is kind of impressive, Dorothea said, grinning. You already seem quite charismatic to me. Do you think so? Perhaps you could explain what you mean by that. I'm sure the professor would be willing to understand why you were unable to finish the assignment if we focus on this. A moment of silence passed over the two. I'm kidding, of course. You know, I got the feeling but you were so serious during that it was hard to tell, Dorothea admitted. I can see why you want advice on how to be more personable, as it were. The aspiring leader looking to change the world might not have the most experience when it comes to dealing with those below her. I would not put it like that. At the academy we are all equals. Yes, I may be the house leader, but we all have our own advantages and disadvantages. For example, despite his rather lethargic way of doing things, Linhard is surprisingly skilled at faith magic, almost infuriatingly so with how lackadaisical he is. Whereas the two of us aren't that skilled in it. Dorothea had to stop herself from giggling at the irritation evident in her voice. That is quite the mystery. Lin certainly doesn't seem like the type to have a lot of faith, yet he somehow is able to wield it like a natural holy man. And neither of us will be quite as good with the bow compared to Bernie. Yes, it can be very difficult using a bow if I keep breaking them by accident, Edelgard said, blushing a bit. Regardless, it is like I said, we are all equals, and I hope to be able to rely on you in the future. You really should save those words for the professor, you know, Dorothea teased, getting Edelgard to blush again. How about we focus on the assignment for now? Edelgard asked, as Dorothea decided to relent. She didn't want poor Edie to overheat, after all. Humming to herself as she walked the halls of Garreg Mach, Dorothea found herself in quite the happy mood. It took a bit of head-scratching, but she was able to come up with a simple yet effective plan. Not to mention she was able to hang out with Edie, which was never a bad thing. The princess might seem a bit overbearing at times, but knowing someone so high up was willing to see her as more than just a songstress definitely made her happy. If only she wasn't already interested in someone else, or Dorothea would have tried to work her charms. See you later, Emily. Hearing Shay's voice, Dorothea looked over to see the mercenary waving as she walked away from Dorothea's classmate. Well, Dorothea hadn't really tried to talk with the minor noble often, but if she could get along with Shay, maybe she wasn't that bad? Hey there, Emily, grinning, she approached the noble, who turned around at her voice. And almost immediately her eyes changed into a glare. What do you want? Right, she should have expected that. I just wanted to say hi. Well, if that's all, then I'm going, Emily said, walking away without another word. Letting out an irritated sigh, Dorothea reminded herself that not every noble was like her nicer classmates. It wasn't anything new, but at least Emily didn't pretend to like her just to get what she wanted. Continuing her walk, Dorothea tried to move past that. Which thankfully was rather easy as she stumbled upon her professor. Oh, Dorothea, hello, I was looking for you. Did you want some tea? You wanted to have tea with me? Yes, I had tea with Edelgard before, and I realized it would probably be good to have tea with other students as well. Would you like to have some together? Well, I'm not going to say no, Dorothea said with a smile. Good. Do you mind if I ask what your preferred blends are? Well, I am in the mood for some sweet apple blend, Dorothea said, as they began to make their way to the tea gardens. She also had to admit, it was cute seeing her professor try to prepare the tea, carefully pouring the hot water into the pot with the blend of leaves. Haven't prepared tea much before, huh? Not really. This is only the third time I've had some. Though I made sure to read up on how to prepare this properly, Byleth said, as she let the tea sit for a moment. I also brought some sweets, though they're only cookies. I don't mind, Professor, Dorothea replied, grinning as she took one of the offered treats. Did you buy these from the shop we went to last time? Yeah, they were tasty, so I wanted to get some more, Byleth answered, taking one herself. I would have gotten more, but my funds are actually getting a bit low. Oh? Didn't have much saved up during your time as a mercenary? No, I had a decent amount saved up, Byleth elaborated as she began to pour the tea. The funds the church gives aren't much, so I have to use my own money when it comes to preparing everyone for the missions. That caught Dorothea off guard as she stared at her professor. So, when you gave everyone a new set of gear and armor before our first mission? My own money. The church's funds, 1,000 gold, was only able to pay for half of that. You know, I knew the church could be stingy, but I didn't think it'd be that bad, Dorothea said with a huff. Though, you really don't need to go that far, Professor. I'm sure no one would be happy if you ended up broke because of this. I just want to make sure all of you are okay, Byleth replied, sipping from the tea. Still, you should make sure to be ready for the future, Dorothea lightly chided, before smiling. But how about we discuss something light? How about the opera? I was only there once, so I'd like to know more. That I can completely understand, the opera is certainly a wonderful place to be. Sure, we might get a bit catty, but all of us in the opera company look out for one another. That makes sense. It's kind of like Geralt's mercenaries. I suppose? I wouldn't have much experience in that regard, so I'll take your word for it. And I'll do the same for you, Byleth said, a small smile on her face, looking a tad too stiff. Come now, Professor, you don't need to force yourself to smile around me. Oh, it's not really forcing, Byleth responded, looking a bit sheepish. It's difficult to smile naturally, even when I feel happy. So I try to put one on whenever it feels appropriate. You know, your sister did say you have a hard time expressing yourself, not that there's anything wrong with that. However, if you would like some advice, then I would say to keep your body relaxed. It may be subtle, but you stiffened up when you tried to smile. Oh, thank you, Byleth said, nodding at her. You're pretty good at reading body language. It comes with the territory. Aside from making sure my acting is believable, being able to read someone else means I know how to act around them. Someone might act shy, but their posture, and where their eyes might wander, can let me know that with a wink and a smile they'll be putty in anyone's hands. I see. Well, I can understand how reading someone can be helpful, but I tend to do so from a combat perspective. But a conversation can be quite the battlefield as well, though I understand what you mean, and it's not like I didn't learn how to fight. My seniors at the opera company made sure I knew how to. Though I only recently learned how to use magic. You did? Yup, I managed to butter up a noble into giving me some magic tomes after I planned on joining the academy. Took some hard work, but I like to think it was worth it, Dorothea said, unashamedly. I would say so. It can be difficult to learn how to use magic, even more so for commoners, so it says much about you that you were able to do so on your own. Well, Manuela did tell me a few things when she was still at Mittelfrank, so it wasn't completely on my own, Dorothea admitted, blushing a bit. Even so, it's impressive, Byleth said with a smile. No need to praise me so much. I mean, you already know the reason why I'm here. And? Should it matter that you want to get married? Byleth asked, a bit confused. I mean, most people would look down on someone trying to marry into wealth. Setting her cup down, Byleth thought for a moment. You're working hard, and even if you do want to marry to life and leisure, you still put the effort in classes and during the missions. Even if you weren't, your dream is your dream, there's no reason to look down on you for it. Geez, you sure are a smooth talker, Professor, Dorothea said, blushing a bit. Thank you. She responded, getting Dorothea to giggle. Oh Professor, you really should be careful, lest you turn into a heartbreaker. Ah, is that a metaphor? Byleth asked, the sincerity making Dorothea laugh. Nothing to worry about, Professor. Ah, though it seems we've had quite the conversation, the teapot is already empty, Dorothea said, amused at how quickly time passed. Oh, I guess we should end it here then. Unless you want more. Maybe some other time, grinning, Dorothea got up, ready to leave, only for Byleth to stop her. Before you go, I did have something for you. Oh. Despite how my sister can be, she is right about giving flowers when you enjoy a performance. Reaching into her coat, Byleth brought out a wrapped lily. It may be a few years late, but here you go. Oh my, thank you Professor, grinning, Dorothea took the flower as Byleth got up, collecting the items on the table. No need to thank me, though I hope I get to see you again on stage. Maybe one day? After all, who knows what the future holds? Chapter 39, Liabilities and Assets. Hey Selene. Emily called out the instant she spotted the priestess in question working amid the shelves of the library, prompting a sigh from Selene and several shushes from the monks around that she completely ignored. Hello, Lady Korsh, Selene greeted as she turned towards the younger woman, is there a reason you wished to speak with me? Well, after how helpful you were the last time I had a personal issue, I thought we should talk again. You were so nice and thoughtful and all that, I just had to come by again. Especially since you helped resolve all those problems I was having. Selene raised an eyebrow at the overly cheerful girl, who still wasn't nearly as subtle as she thought she was. Alright then. I don't have much to do right now, anyway. Though I do have to ask, wasn't the choir festival today? Oh please, like I'm going to that stupid thing. Ah, and there was the usual surliness. Very well, I shall have to speak with you about that later, but for now, we can speak about your personal issue. Gesturing for her to follow, Selene led Emily into the private room they had used before, making sure to lock the door behind them. If you weren't still so idiotic, I'd commend you for coming to me rather than to Mosh again. Hey, I'm not an idiot. I actually have some valuable information. You do? Selene asked, evidently not believing her. Yeah. I actually got info about that Shay girl. Kronia said, quite proud of herself. She says was stationed in Ordelia before infiltrating those mercs, and that her minder was someone called Periander. Periander? That name sounds familiar. I'm sure it does, but it seems that she doesn't have any specific mission at the moment. Aside from making a name for herself, it looks like that girl is looking to get a promotion if she can, Kronia said with a chuckle, before she frowned. She's very annoying about how to properly act around the beasts though. Yes, it's almost as if we're trying to remain hidden while we are here, Bias chided as she frowned too. Speaking of missions, I do believe you're supposed to be getting close to the princess, not a different infiltrator. Hey. I'm doing my job. She's sisters with the professor of the Empire class, and that Imperial beast is clearly trying to get the mercenary on her side. So if I get close to the professor by using Shay, then I'll get closer to the princess. So your plan is to use a student from a different class, rather than approach the professor of your own class. There's a difference. Shay already has an in with the professor, I'd just be some random student trying to cozy up to her otherwise. And you don't think the professor might take notice that you're attempting to get close to her by using her sister? Please, like that dull-eyed beast would notice anything. To Bias's surprise, Kronia actually frowned at herself and seemed to be thinking. No, you have a point. My way should still work though. If I was coming up to the professor otherwise, I'd just be another student, but if I'm friends with her sister then she'll open up easier. Besides, I can't just go up to the princess, she's already suspicious of me. That was well reasoned. All right, I accept and approve of your plan. Like I need your approval. You do, Unless you want to talk to Dimash again. Whatever, I get it. You know, I wouldn't even need to do all this if our new glorious leaders didn't let the princess slip her leash to begin with. We wouldn't need to do a lot of things if things just went perfectly. Blame that dastard Aegir for turning on us before Thales's body was even cold. Kronia scowled at the reminder. And why haven't we killed him yet? We haven't done anything because it isn't our assignment. If you want to ask Mycen or Elin why they haven't dealt with him, go ahead and ask. I doubt they'll be happy with the question though. Humph, fine, whatever. I should get out of here anyway, don't want the vermin to notice I ditched their sacred choir practice, Kronia said, scowling as she got ready to leave. Well, at least you have the sense to return there, Bias said as she unlocked the door. Do try not to blow your cover. I'm not an idiot. She certainly could have fooled Bias with how she acted. Honestly, she wished she didn't have to deal with any of these idiots, especially not a petulant brat who barely knew how to hide herself, but she had her own personal mission to deal with. I'll make those dastards pay, Pitacus, she muttered, thinking of her twin as she turned back the library shelves. Hubert, can I speak with you? Byleth asked once she found her student after the choir festival. I hope this isn't about my singing, professor, the gaunt young man commented. I did tell you beforehand that I would sing solemnly. Not that. I wanted to ask your advice about something. Oh? Is this about tactics involving the mission? I do remember you being quite pleased with my idea of smoking out those hiding, though I must admit I may have gotten inspiration from your sister. I wanted to ask what Edelgard likes. Hubert raised an eyebrow. Oh? Is there any particular reason why? It's her birthday in a few weeks, right? I wasn't sure what to get her, so I wanted to check with you. Heh, I suppose I should feel honored then. I guess. I just want to make sure you don't stab me if I get her something bad. Come now, professor, no need for jokes like that. Poisoning on the other hand. Why not get her flowers? It is a common gift to give for one's birthday. You're right. But it feels like I should get her something different, you know? She is the house leader, and has helped me greatly despite my short time here so far, Byleth explained. I know Dorothea wants to take her out into the town again, so it doesn't need to be a big gift. Does she? He may need to speak with Lady Edelgard. She may have more freedom thanks to Thales being dead and gone, and good riddance to the vile bastard, but she still had a war to prepare for. Spending too much of her time dilly-dallying about could backfire on her. Well, why not invite her to another sparring session? Lady Edelgard did seem to take your lesson to heart after that first spar you had, so I'm sure she'll appreciate it. I guess. Not a bad idea, but, I must say I never thought I would see a legendary mercenary be stumped about getting someone a gift. Here I thought you'd be able to trust your instincts. My instincts? Byleth adopted a thinking pose, before nodding to herself. I see. Thank you, Hubert, I think I have an idea now. I am glad to hear that. I am here to help, after all. You're very good at making innocuous statements sound very menacing. Good work. Hubert smirked, unafraid to show his amusement as the professor walked off. It did feel nice to be praised for his efforts, though it wasn't about to stop him from checking to make sure the professor wasn't about to harm Her Highness through whatever gift she bought. Staying silent as he followed his professor from a distance, Hubert meticulously noted everything she did. Everything from who she talked to what she ate, and what she did in her free time. To some, his efforts might seem a bit much, but for a retainer of a future emperor, this was the bare minimum to ensure her safety. It certainly gave him an interesting perspective on the professor as she went about her day-to-day, that was for sure. For starters, it was almost amusing how much she seemed to enjoy eating when she invited students to dine with her. 4 different meals in such a short time was quite the sight. He would have been impressed if the last meal didn't involve her waving him over to eat with her and Linhard. No matter, it just meant he had to get better at his stealth. And thankfully for him, the lessons they were doing were perfect for that, as he was able to have perfectly legitimate reasons to practice following someone in secret thanks to the training sessions. He had to admit, he may have taken more pleasure than necessary at sneaking up to someone right when they thought they were about to win just to scare them. Still, he wouldn't be so arrogant as to believe his efforts would be enough to avoid notice from the professor, so he made sure to follow from a further distance next chance he had. Sure, he wouldn't be able to hear what she said, but he could still see what she was doing. Such as her spending time with students with other houses, like the Edmund girl as the two had tea together, or a sparring session with that apprentice of her father's. He was a tad surprised to see her inviting Sitha's sister to a meal though. He was certain that Professor Eisner had no love for the church, so her choosing to spend time with someone who had such a close relationship with a leader of the church was unexpected. Perhaps because she believed her to only be a small child? Still, it was something he would make note of, just in case. And it seemed that after spending time around the academy, she was finally heading out to town, which meant it was time to see what she was going to buy. At least, that's what he thought as she instead went to spend some time with the ruffians from her mercenary company. He did have to admit, getting them on Lady Edelgard's side would certainly be helpful. After all, those serving under a legendary knight like Gerald must be strong as well, no? Even if they did appear to be idiotic, such as the bald one loudly saying she's has it made easy with all the nobles. Honestly, it wasn't a surprise she and her sister were quite the odd pie. Mind telling me what you're doing following Byleth around? A voice from behind him said, getting Hubert to whip around to see the scruffy-looking man from Byleth's band. Heh. I suppose I can't convince you that this was just a coincidence? Hubert asked as he tried to calm his racing heart. It had been a very long time since anyone had ever snuck up behind him, and the prideful part of him felt wounded that he was so easily caught by a commoner. He should be better than that. Well, you can't if you start the conversation like that, the man replied with a lazy smile. He reminded Hubert of some of the people he had worked with in the past, those who operated in the darker parts of society. He had the same look in his eyes, the gaze of someone entirely comfortable with the idea of committing murder without hesitation. Relax, kid. I'm not going to kill you because you're a student of the academy and that would screw over Byleth, just like you're not going to kill me because it would screw up your own position. I don't know about that. A mercenary's life is filled with dangers, after all. You never know what could happen. True, the world's a dangerous place. An academy student could go missing pretty easily. His smile widened. But that's not going to happen, right? Because here I am to keep you safe, kid. You're one of Byleth's students, huh? I am, yes. Does that afford me some free protection, mercenary? You bet it does. Her job is to look out for you kids, so that means you're under our protection by extension. Hubert smiled, smothering whatever annoyance he might have felt. The man was a killer, but he wouldn't kill Hubert. Not here and now, at least. You would be one of Geralt the Bladebreaker's officers then. If I may guess, you would be Ezra. Ezra whistled. Wow, I'm impressed. You got that completely wrong, kid. Hubert blinked. Ah, no, I don't think I did. Nah, you're right, I was just fucking with you. Good on you for not believing me. Skepticism's handy in our line of work. Our. Ezra grinned. You've got the eyes of a killer, kid. Am I wrong? Should I take that to mean you are the professor's protector? Nope. If I wanted to preen, I might call myself her mentor, but her dad's got a far better claim to that title than I do, and that's not counting the other mercs that helped out. Either way, she doesn't need much protection these days. All that to say, it's nice to meet ya, Hubert. Byleth has talked a lot about you kids. It was deeply annoying having his own trick turned around on him. Heh, no need to get annoyed, kid. None of the other officers noticed you, and I'm the type of guy who keeps his eyes out. Hubert huffed in some amusement. He could recognize the peace offering for what it was. A part of him was still considering how he could kill Ezra with no one being any the wiser, but he did that for everyone he interacted with. A larger part of him was more interested in the potential for this man to be an asset to Her Highness, and that part further noted that gaining the professor's loyalty would most likely bring this man right along with her. It was almost funny, without those who slither breathing down Her Highness's neck, he had more reason to consider people as assets than as liabilities. Of course, if they turned out to be the latter, he would still do what needed to be done. Very well then. May I take my leave then? Oh sure, I did what I wanted to do anyway. He raised an eyebrow. And that would be? Distracting you long enough for Byleth to leave? Oh. Well, now he was irritated again. All right, you can run off now. Nice chatting with you, and feel free to keep Geralt's mercenaries in mind if you want any work done. Very well, Ezra. I will certainly keep your mercenary band in mind. All right, Kmin kid, don't go back to the threats or I'll have to escalate this by introducing you to the other mercs and saying you're following Byleth because you have a crush on her. Hubert blinked. You are a cruel and vile man. Ezra grinned. I try. A part of Hubert was still making plans to poison Ezra even days after his encounter with the aggravating mercenary. It helped calm his nerves in the midst of his continued investigations into the Eisner family. After his less than stellar efforts to investigate the professor were stymied at such an important moment, he decided to broaden his focus to see what else he could discover of the mysterious mercenary family. Beginning with Geralt, Hubert quickly found that the Bladebreaker, arguably the strongest mercenary in modern Fodlan, was, honestly, something of a boring old man. He kept to his work as the knight's captain most days, went fishing on his off days, and got drunk after work. Not especially impressive and not really where his investigative efforts should be focused anyway, so he decided to leave the knight captain for another time. The fact that Geralt often drank with his mercenaries in his off hours had little to do with his decision. Really, the fact that he spent so much time around Eloise and the man's terrible jokes had more to do with it. As for the younger sister, Shay Eisner was, paradoxically for someone he suspected of being a member of those who slither in the dark, a remarkably carefree person. She spent her days training when she could and spending time with her classmates otherwise. She was with the other members of the Blue Lion's house most often, which made it somewhat difficult to keep an eye on her, though she also had friends in the other houses. She spent a not insignificant amount of time with Dorothea, though she had some difficulty understanding the topic of opera, and Caspar was a frequent sparring partner for her. As was Felix, but he was a lion so that was less significant. Most importantly, of course, was the time she spent with Emily, which was more than the infiltrator spent with anyone else. Keeping an eye on Cronia would be a difficult proposition, given she was, from what Hubert knew of her, quite likely to jump to attempted murder were he to be discovered, but it was important to note the time the two interacted. He also saw Shay go on what seemed to be a date with the prince's retainer, Didu, so that was of interest. Lastly, he went back to watching Byleth, though at this point he decided to just make it obvious that he was doing so. She clearly had decent enough situational awareness to discover him even when he was making an effort to avoid discovery, so he chose to just derive some enjoyment from very obviously taking notes of her behavior and watching the other students get unnerved by his presence. Strangely though, he did notice Thunder Catherine also appeared to be spying on her. Which was certainly curious. Perhaps the church didn't have as much trust in her as the archbishop pretended? Regardless, he had little luck discovering anything truly useful to Her Highness, especially given a mixture of his other duties and class time kept taking his attention away from his investigation. He didn't completely forget about his intentions to discover the truth behind the Eisner family, but he had other matters to focus on, such as Her Highness's upcoming birthday. A part of him felt a tad annoyed when he arrived outside her room only to find a bouquet of roses already waiting for her. Somehow, despite not being there, Monica had managed to best him in being the first to give a gift to her. Hubert delivered his gift for Her Highness, a book on monarch studies, early in the morning, then accompanied her as she went about her day. Her thanks and praise for the gift kept him in relatively high spirits, enough so that he didn't show too much annoyance at Ferdinand's attempt to one-up him. "Here you are, Edelgard," the fool declared as he held out his gift to her, presenting Her Highness with a pair of admittedly fine riding boots. "Of course, I do not expect you to put them on right away, but I am sure you will see some use for them soon enough." "Oh, thank you, Ferdinand," Edelgard said, more bemused than happy, though she did grant the fool a smile. "I'm sure they will be very useful." "You are very welcome." "Oh, and I did bring something else too," he said, before handing Her Highness a bag of tea that Hubert was already making a mental note to test for poison. He didn't really think the idiot would do something like that, but the possibility of him being used as a foolish patsy was higher than zero. I recall you prefer the Hresvelg blend. I do hope it aids you in times of stress. Thank you, Ferdinand. That is very thoughtful. Her smile was more genuine that time, much to Ferdinand's pleasure and Hubert's annoyance. More gifts were to come as the day progressed, ranging from Linhard's somewhat thoughtless gift of a book of crest designs to Bernadetta's shyly presented bag of cookies, which were accepted with appropriate gratitude from Her Highness. Petra, meanwhile, gave Her Highness a finely crafted hunting dagger, in its sheath so it wouldn't be construed as a threat, and a box of spices from Brigid, both of which were nice gestures that Hubert still planned to check later, while Casper's present was a steel axe with a ribbon tied around it. Blunt, but appropriate. Kronia didn't even bother to try, and Hubert was grateful she didn't. It meant less work for him later. Finally, Dorothea arrived for her outing with Her Highness, and Hubert pretended to see them off before following after the pair, because obviously he would. He knew enough about Dorothea to be aware she would not hurt Her Highness, but that didn't mean he believed no harm could possibly come to her while she was out in town. Regardless, the outing went well, and Her Highness seemed quite happy as she returned to the monastery, chatting with Dorothea about classes and other topics of interest. Hubert listened along, making mental notes of anything that sounded important, and made his way towards Her Highness, planning to rejoin Lady Edelgard as she made her way into the academy. And if he happened to startle Dorothea with his sudden appearance, well, he couldn't be blamed for her lack of spatial awareness. Though his plans were thwarted before he could enact them due to a surprise appearance by Professor Eisner, who was standing near the pathway up towards the monastery. She had her hands behind her back and was clearly waiting for Lady Edelgard, judging by how quickly her attention turned towards Her Highness. Hubert was aware that Professor Eisner had more reason to want Lady Edelgard alive than dead, or at least appeared to, but he still felt some tension as he hurried towards the group. Thankfully, his concerns were unfounded as the professor presented her gift to Her Highness, a stuffed bear colored in imperial crimson, decorated with a royal purple ribbon around its neck and holding a carnation in its paws. Here you go. I hope you like it. Lady Edelgard stared at the plush bear for a moment, before she slowly reached out and took it. It's a rather childish gift, but it would be rude of me to ask you to return it, so thank you, Professor. You're welcome. I'm glad you like it. Lady Edelgard ducked her head, avoiding the professor's gaze, and Hubert felt his eyebrow raise when he saw a hint of pink at Her Highness's cheeks. Something Dorothea also noticed, judging by her teasing smile, before she also noticed him and jerked back. Hubie. Don't do that. Lady Edelgard didn't flinch at Dorothea's loud exclamation, though she did give Hubert an unimpressed look, which he returned with a smile in turn. Hello, Your Highness. I hope you had a pleasant day out. Yes, I did. Thank you for your concern, though I would ask that you stop trying to scare our classmates, she reprimanded. I'll try, Your Highness, he lied without shame, before regarding the professor again. He did have to admit, she had good instincts. Chapter 40, The March to Magdrid. When it came to whatever mission they were assigned to that month, the students were expected to start marching based on how long it would take to arrive at their location. As such, for this particular mission, they had to rise rather early so they could follow behind the Knights of Syros as their rearguard to Magdrid Way, something many of them weren't really keen on. Please tell me we're taking a break soon, I don't have the energy for this. Linhard muttered as he let out a yawn. I don't see how you can be sleepy in this weather, Lin. Even with this coat, the cold's really bad, Casper responded as he shivered a bit. Ha, if you think this is bad, then you definitely don't want to come up here during the winters. If you aren't careful, you might end up buried under the snow, Sylvain teased as he and the rest of the Blue Lions seemed to be handling the cold better, minus Shay. Could have gotten better coats at least. Shay muttered, shivering too. My apologies, these were the only ones the church could lend us. Apparently the vanguard had already taken several, Dimitri apologized. You at least had the foresight to ask them for coats, so we are thankful for that, Edelgard complimented. Good job Dimitri, Byleth added, seemingly unfazed by the cold. Excuse me Professor, I thought you weren't used to the cold. Annette asked, surprise evident in her voice. I'm not. I'm just channeling fire magic, Byleth responded, it's keeping me warm. Wait really? Shay asked, before approaching her sister and pressing right up against her side. Whoa, you're really warm, what the hell? Why didn't you tell me you could do this? You didn't ask, Byleth said, a bit annoyed as Shay clung onto her. Thinking to herself for a moment, Edelgard began to channel some magic as well and felt some warmth flow through her body. It seemed learning magic could have its uses. Ah, Professor, perhaps you could share that technique with the rest of us. Ferdinand requested. Byleth tilted her head, thinking. It's too late to do that easily at this point, but I could teach the basics of black magic for our next class. It might be good for you all to know at least one spell, even if you prefer other fields of study. Ugh, that sounds like a pain, Casper complained, I'm no good at that reason stuff. It's remarkable how comfortable you are with admitting that, Linhard murmured, earning a little chuckle from Hubert. Do all of you need to be talking so much? Ingrid complained from her place in the procession, you're going to give us away if we run into any enemies. Enemies? Bernadetta squeaked, wait, I thought we were supposed to be the rear guard. Why would we run into any enemies? You never know, Felix commented, it would be smart of Lonato to put out scouts. He didn't seem to notice Ash had stiffened at Lonato's name as he continued. Maybe we might actually see some combat. I don't know, it seems too foggy for anyone to actually spot us out here, Sylvain said, glancing up at the completely overcast sky. It's not really good weather for scouting, especially with the knights out in force to cut down any scouts they might catch. Shay, meanwhile, noticed Ash's reaction and pulled away from her sister, even if she'd rather stay close to the source of warmth. Hey Ash, how are you doing? I'm doing okay, just more nervous than I'd thought I'd be. Yeah, I can see why, but well, we're all here, so you can rely on all of us. Well, maybe aside from Petra, Shay muttered, looking over at the Brigid girl who looked ready to keel over in the cold. Why are these lands so cold? Eesh, guess we really are lucky you guys aren't here when it's snowing, Sylvain commented. What is this snow you speak of? Well, it's kinda like frozen rain. Though I guess that's more hail. Frozen or rain. That is sounding dangerous. It's not that bad, Byleth said as she overheard them talking, though it can block the door if it piles too high. Made Shay freak out once. Hey, I didn't freak out. You threw yourself out the window cause you thought we were trapped. A small frown appeared on her face. You didn't even bother opening the window first. A loud bark of laughter from Emily told Shay she was going to get teased heavily about that when they went back. More concerning though was the fact that Shay could clearly see most of Blue Lions nodding along like what she did was a perfectly normal thing to do. The only one that wasn't was Mercedes, and she looked equally concerned by her friend's standards of normalcy. Heh, I'm glad to see you're all keeping your spirits high back here, Catherine called out as she caught up with their procession. Well, not exactly caught up since she was coming from the front. That's good, a very important thing to have when marching. Thank you, Lady Catherine. We're honored to be able to fight alongside a holy knight like you, Dimitri said. No need for the flattery, if you want to show your gratitude just make sure to do a good job. With the wielder of the Thunderbrand on our side, I wonder how much we will be able to do, Edelgard commented. Quite, one must wonder why he would incite a rebellion given the forces the church has, Hubert mused, getting Byleth to glance over at Catherine with a small frown. Whatever his reasons, we have a mission to accomplish. Just make sure Report. Called out a church soldier as he ran up to them. Lonato's forces are much larger than expected. They were able to slip past the vanguard using the fog for cover. What? What forces could he even have? Catherine asked, shock evident on her face, before Byleth abruptly moved, grabbing Ingrid by her shoulder and pulling her backwards. Hey, what's the big ? A sharp whistling noise cut her off as an arrow flew past right where she was standing. Down. Catherine immediately shouted, prompting the students to duck in case of any further archer fire, shields up if you have them. Byleth frowned, trying to peer through the mist. With how low the visibility was, it was unlikely that whatever archers were out there had a clear enough view to actually hit any of them properly. The first arrow was probably just aimed towards whatever sound the archer picked up in hopes of hitting the enemy, which wasn't something a master archer would actually do. Even a standardly trained one would probably hold until their commander gave the word. She didn't have enough information to make any big guesses, but her instincts told her she was either dealing with someone masterful enough to spot and aim at an individual target in the middle of heavy fog, or a complete amateur who just aimed at the loudest sound they heard. And, at the moment, the latter might actually be more dangerous to her students. "We shouldn't bunch up," she stated, directing her words towards Catherine. "If we're all together, any archers the enemy has have a greater chance of hitting someone so long as they aim in our direction." "True, but we don't want anyone getting lost in the fog either, right? Besides, Lonato shouldn't have enough soldiers to surround us properly," the knight replied. He's a minor lord. He shouldn't have that large a force to begin with." "Exactly, so let's be cautious here. We take down anyone that we see come through the fog." Catherine glanced back at the pair of swordsmen she brought with her. "You two, with me. We'll head in while this bunch stays back. I'm gonna assume you can keep the students safe, Professor." Byleth nodded. "I will. Try not to die." Catherine smirked. "Don't worry, I'll make sure to last so you can get a rematch." As she headed forward, moving carefully into the mist with her back up, Ingrid glanced back at Byleth. Thanks for that. Though, shouldn't Professor Hanneman be the one leading us?" "He rode ahead earlier to speak with the knights forming the vanguard," Byleth answered. "You're stuck with me. Sorry. Honestly, I would think anyone would prefer having the professional mercenary at their side instead of a crest scholar in a situation like this," Edelgard pointed out, her shield still raised as her eyes scanned the thick fog. "No disrespect meant to Professor Hanneman, of course." "You're not incorrect," Dmitri agreed, keeping his own watch as the students felt the tension in the air starting to grow. It wasn't helped by the obvious scent of freshly spilled blood on the wind. "We can't hold this position forever though. We should have more than enough people to handle any threats out there, and we can't take the chance that the enemy could get past us." "Are you sure we can't just stay here?" Bernadetta asked. "Staying on defense sounds good to me." "Defense always one more back in class." "Light the torches in our supplies," Byleth ordered. "There's a forest to the north. We're going to avoid going there in favor of sticking to the fields. There's already too little visibility to risk it, but there's a high chance of enemy soldiers hiding there specifically because of that low visibility, so I want a portion of you on our northern flank to keep us defended." Catherine was headed to the southwest, so we'll focus our efforts westward. "Anyone with shields, comes to the front with me. Lancers can form our back row, sword fighters cover our flanks, archers and casters at the back. Also, Bernadetta, fire an arrow in that direction." Me. Yup. Here, right about," Byleth raised her hand, before pointing at a specific spot in the thick fog. "There. Shoot an arrow right there." Nobody could really tell what she was pointing at, which only made Bernie's nervousness worse, but she still pulled back the string of her bow anyway. Please don't hit anybody on our side." She let the arrow loose, and a second later the students heard a scream of pain, prompting a nod from Byleth. "There, that should draw them out." Shay was pretty sure she'd never take another job in Faerghus again if she could help it. The cold was bad, the fog was worse, and while she fully understood why Byleth was taking things slow and steady to make sure all the students stayed safe, dear goddess was she getting exhausted by how slow everything felt. Which was probably more evidence of her skewed sense of how battles should work than a real indictment of how speedy things were going considering she'd already cut down 3 people. "Geez, this is dull," muttered Emily, so Shay at least knew she wasn't the only one thinking it. "How can you say that?" Ash asked, frowning at her. "Because it is. I'm itching to run into the fray here." "Pretty sure that would get you blindsided," Shay pointed out. "I can agree that things are going slow, but Bai's right about it being safer." "I don't want safe, I want to gut someone." "Are you always like this?" Ash asked, looking unnerved. Which was fair, considering how Em tended to be. "The girl's a psychopath, of course everyone is disturbed by her," Arvel pointed out, completely unnecessarily because Shay was already aware of that. It just didn't bug her that much. "Oh, don't make that face at me, you're the one who decided to be friends with her." That wasn't what Shay was trying to convey with her face, but whatever. I see we're feeling quite chatty on this end. Oh, hey Hubert, Shay greeted, familiar enough with the tall boy's weird cadence that she didn't need to glance back to know it was him. What's up? Just curious how things are looking on this flank. It's quite difficult to spot things in this fog, so I'm almost feeling left out. I'm sure you can sympathize, Ash. Huh? Oh, I guess. I don't really, yeah. Quite. One might even say this fog appears unnatural, Hubert commented, looking directly at Emily, who didn't catch the hint at all and wasn't paying attention to him. Ash, meanwhile, looked thoughtful. Hey, yeah, that is true. It's strange that the fog is so thick this time of year. It should be lightening up, at least more than this. You see my point then? It does seem very unnatural. Perhaps as though it was being caused by something, Hubert continued, glancing at Shay now. Perhaps some form of magic. Huh? Is there magic that can do that? Shay asked. Yes. There is. A rare type of magic. Some type of fel art, for instance. That certain groups may have knowledge of. Huh? Like who? Oh, shit, is that what this is? Emily asked after a second, and Hubert found himself re-evaluating his impressions on the intelligence of the two girls because that was far too genuine of a question to be an attempt at deception. All right, guess that makes this easier. And she promptly broke rank and sprinted off into the mist, prompting Shay to stiffen in surprise. Don't just run off like that, she called out before running off after her in the exact same way. Ah, wait. Shay. Emily. And Ash hurried after the pair too, leaving Hubert with a half-amused, half-bemused look on his face. Well, this should have an interesting outcome. By the time Shay found Emily again, the fog was actually starting to fade. And the reason for that became clear soon enough as she discovered her friend pinning a dark mage to the ground and messily stabbing him in the chest over and over again. Hey, I think you got him, Shay said, before noticing Ash caught up to them. Oh, hey Ash. What in the world is wrong with you? Ash asked, which felt kind of rude before Shay noticed he was staring right at Emily. Which was more fair? Oh what, a girl can't relieve some tension. Emily teased, before pulling her dagger free and wiping it on the dead mage's robes, not that this wretch was all that fun to go after. These magic types just don't know what to do when you get too close to them. She smirked over at Ash. It's the same for archers, in my experience. Alright, we get it, you're very scary, Shay replied, before looking around the field as her friend frowned at having her fun ruined. Do you see anybody that looks important? Lonato. Yeah, exactly, like Lonato. Shay glanced back at Ash, then followed his line of sight towards the ruins at the end of the path. There, striding out from the pillars of some long-ruined building, was the familiar sight of Lord Lonato of House Gaspard, his white hair hanging loose around his head as he regarded the three students from atop an armored warhorse. I see the Central Church was not satisfied with taking one son from me. Oh? This is the beast we're here to put down then? Emily asked, regarding the old man with a faint interest before Ash pushed past her. Lonato. Why are you doing this? The Lord of Gaspard regarded his adoptive son for a moment, before looking towards Shay. I remember you. Geralt the Bladebreaker's daughter. The younger one. Does your father work for the Knights of Syros now, girl? I think you should answer Ash, sir, Shay replied, inclining her head towards her friend, who was staring at his adoptive father with a look of genuine betrayal. I would think my reasons were obvious. The Central Church is corrupt to its core. Rhea is an infidel who has deceived the people and desecrated the goddess. The only righteous answer for her crimes in the death she has so readily delivered unto any who dare speak out against her heresy. What are you talking about? Lonato, what could justify doing this? Ash questioned. I saw the people out in the mist. They weren't soldiers, they were townsfolk. Villagers that should have been under your protection. Those who follow me are righteous crusaders who seek a better world than the cruelty we are trapped in by that vile witch. They are all bolstered by the blessings of the goddess herself. It does not matter what their origin is, only that they seek to fight for the truth. So you sent untrained civilians to die against fully armed and armored knights. Emily noted, sounding amused, you really are quite the vicious beast. I'm almost impressed. Would you shut up? Ash demanded, glaring at Emily. Lonato isn't a beast. He's a kind man. A good man. Lonato's gaze softened at Ash's defense of him, before he urged his horse forward. Shay's eyes couldn't help but go to the spear in his hand as the treacherous lord spoke. You know the truth, Ash. You know that Kristoff was murdered by these heathens. Can't you hear his soul screaming out for justice? His gaze turned towards Shay again. Your father agreed with me. He knew the truth of the matter, that the Central Church could not be trusted, that Rhea was a liar and a monster. I know he would have joined me were he able. Will you not do the same? Yeah, sorry, but whatever you have going on here has nothing to do with me, Shay replied. I don't like Rhea, but I'm here to do a job. Or an assignment, I guess, since I'm a student. She lifted one of her swords, pointing it at the Lord of Gaspard. So either surrender or don't. I'd prefer it if you do give up though, for Ash's sake. Just an ignorant child then, unwilling to accept reality. Fine then. I will end you before life's cruelties have a chance to ruin that naive innocence. Lonato, no. Ash yelled, please. I don't want you to die. I shall not, my foolish son. For I have virtue and the goddess herself on my side. Lonato declared, before his horse broke into a full gallop, charging straight at the three students. A smirk crossed Emily's face, amused by the fool's mad last stand, before it dropped when Ash suddenly tackled her, pushing her out of the way of Lord Lonato's charge. Shay, meanwhile, simply waited until the Lord was close enough, his spear thrusting straight for her face, before she vanished in a violet flash that brought her right up on his horse's back. Lonato jerked back, genuine surprise in his eyes as he attempted to bring up his shield, but Shay was nothing if not fast, and her foot slammed into his chest, knocking him straight out of the saddle. The Lord of Gaspard crashed to the ground with a heavy thud, followed by Shay as she landed far more easily on her feet. She moved towards the Lord, her swords in hand, before she jerked back, bringing them up to deflect a sudden spear thrust from the old man, who made it to his feet far faster than she would have expected. You should have gone for the kill, girl, Lonato growled, before stabbing straight at the young mercenary as she found herself getting pushed back by his ferocity. Lonato, stop, please. Ash yelled, getting up from the ground and running at his adoptive father, completely forgetting his own weapon as he tried to just get his father to stop, right before Lonato whirled around and slammed the shaft of his spear against the boy's head. There was no pause from the old man, no moment of hesitation at what he had just done. He just moved straight back into trying to stab through Shay as though nothing had happened, completely uncaring for the son he'd left collapsed on the ground with a massive wound across his head. Shay felt her eyes widen at the sight, before a scowl came to her face and she vanished again, appearing behind Lonato and stabbing at his back only for his shield to catch her blades. There was a dark look in the old man's eyes as he shoved her back, cold and furious. Don't think that trick will work twice on me, you vile witch. He suddenly raised his shield, blocking a thrown knife before he directed a scowl towards Emily, who looked genuinely furious as well, though for what reason, he couldn't care less. Wait your turn. I'll kill you next. No, you won't, came a strong, authoritative voice as Thunder Catherine strode onto the field. Thunderstrike Cassandra, come to taunt me with my son's murder again? Lonato asked, his eyes locked on the object of his hatred. I don't answer to that name, Lonato. And I don't have anything else to say to you. Thunderbrand crackled in her hand, crimson energy flickering about its blade, stained with a mix of blood and steel after Catherine had cleaved through the armored knights of Lonato's guard. Fine. I don't want to hear any justifications for your vile zealotry anyway. Kids, get Ash out of here, Catherine ordered. Don't tell me what to. But I can win this. Shay shouted, interrupting Emily, I know I can. He's not going to go down without you killing him, kid, Catherine stated, and I don't think you want to do that. Shay hesitated, a conflicted look crossing her face, which Lonato decided to take full advantage of, suddenly stabbing towards her. Watch out! Arvel shouted out to her, too late as the blade was about to pierce her, before a ball of flame caught him in the chest and sent him skidding back as Byleth Eisner stepped forward with a look of genuine rage on her face. "Don't you dare hurt my sister!" With a flick of her hand, a healing light glowed around Ash's unconscious body, mending the wound in his head and stirring the boy awake as he blinked. "Huh! Bye!" Shay exclaimed, surprised and happy to see her sister, which did bring some of her anger down. "Hi Shay. Sorry, but I really want to kill this one. Could you handle the stragglers?" Shay blinked. "Oh, are you sure? I mean, he was going to kill you, Shay. I'm going to kill him." She glanced back at Ash. "Sorry. Professor, please, can't you try?" He made his choice. Byleth turned away from them, and nodded to Catherine. "With me?" "Sure thing, Professor." Lonato scowled, glaring at the two women. "You blind fools. Are you truly so enraptured by?" Then a second fireball nearly took his head off, and would have if he hadn't raised his shield in time. Not that it helped him much as Byleth and Catherine charged in with a flurry of blows, both their blades wreathed in lightning as they struck at the old lord. No more words were exchanged, none could be. All that was left was the quick and methodical removal of every defense Lonato had as his spear was first struck from his grasp, then his shield was completely rent to scrap, and finally the pair of blades cut straight through his breastplate and his chest underneath, ripping through him in a bloodied X across his torso. Blood spat from his lips as Lonato stumbled backwards, his eyes still clouded by hate. "Ggat, that, vile woman, she took everything." Before he finally fell back with a crash, left with nothing but one last look at the foggy sky. "Kristoff, forgive me. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you back then," Byleth muttered, staring down at the body of the once kind lord. Catherine sighed. "I never thought things would turn out like this. I never wanted it to. You made your choices. You can't take them back now." "I know." Catherine clapped a hand to Byleth's shoulder. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." She nodded, gave Byleth's shoulder another pat, then turned to walk off. Byleth stared at the body for a few more seconds, then turned away too, going to check on her students and leaving Lonato's body laying in the grassy field. Even in death, it was impossible to miss the regret on his face. Check the description for the links to the author.